On a rain-soaked Thanksgiving, my stepmother slapped me again and again. My crime was crying too loud after refusing her demand for money. I fled to the basement. The door shuddered as her husband, Arthur, hammered on it, their laughter filtering down from the dining room. Then, a quiet tap on the cellar's back door. My wealthy grandfather. "Open up," he said. "I've heard enough." That night, the balance shifted. My name is Sable Arden. The red brick house in Lakewood looked exactly the same, crouched against the darkening Denver sky, absorbing the November rain. Every brick seemed to hold a memory I was actively trying to suppress, a faint, sickly sweet smell of old potpourri and new grievances. Driving here from my new apartment in Capitol Hill had felt like traveling backward in time, my tires hissing on the wet pavement, pulling me back to a place I had just barely escaped. This neighborhood, with its identical manicured lawns and forced suburban cheer, had always felt like a cage. I sat in my car for a full minute, the wipers keeping a frantic, stressful rhythm against the windshield. The invitation, no, the summons, had come from my stepmother, Vivian Cole. It was a family meeting. In this house, that phrase never meant reconciliation. It meant mobilization for a crisis, usually one of her creation, and almost always requiring my checkbook. I had promised my therapist I would hold my boundaries tonight. The words felt hollow and thin in the oppressive humidity of the car. I finally cut the engine and walked through the steady drizzle, not bothering to run. The chill felt appropriate, a necessary armor. Arthur, my father, opened the door before I could knock. He smelled faintly of whiskey and anxiety, a strained brightness on his face that never reached his eyes. "Sable, you made it. Come in, come in. You're soaked. Vivian's just finishing the roast." I stepped into the foyer, the air overly warm. The house was meticulously clean, aggressively sterile. Vivian erased every trace of the life that came before her, including my mother's. The dining room was heavy with the smell of that roast and something cloyingly sweet, like cinnamon and resentment. Vivian was at the head of the table, naturally. She wore cream-colored cashmere, her blonde hair perfectly sculpted. She looked expensive and brittle, like fine china that would shatter if you spoke too loudly. She smiled, a bright, sharp motion that showcased her teeth but went nowhere near her eyes. "Sable, darling, you're late. We were just about to start." My stepsister, Lena, sat opposite me. She was 24, pale and ethereal, and already looked exhausted by the performance. Her fiancé, Bryce, was beside her. Nursing a beer he'd apparently brought himself. He had the easy, arrogant confidence of a man who had never been told no, and he seemed to have sized up this family dynamic instantly. He knew who the players were, and he knew he wasn't the target. He offered me a lazy nod, already dismissing me. "Well, let's eat," Arthur boomed, his voice too loud, desperate to fill the silence. The air was stretched thin. We ate, the silence broken only by the sharp clicks of silverware against porcelain. Vivian kept the conversation flowing, a brittle monologue about her charity work, the appalling state of the neighbor's yard, and the quality of the Cabernet Sauvignon. It was a performance of civility, and we were all her unwilling audience. I pushed food around my plate, the rich meal tasting like ash in my mouth. Vivian raised her glass. "The wine is just lovely, Arthur," she announced, though he hadn't bought it. "It's perfect for a celebration." This was the opening. I tensed, my fork hovering over my plate. "And speaking of celebrations," she continued, her gaze sliding onto me, oily and unwelcome. "We are just so thrilled about Lena and Bryce's big day. We've almost secured the venue. It's absolutely perfect. We just have one tiny, tiny hurdle left to clear." Bryce smirked into his beer. Lena studied her mashed potatoes as if they held the secrets to the universe, her face pale. "Just the deposit," Vivian said, affecting a light, airy tone that set my teeth on edge. "The caterer, they insist on it. These people, a simple $12,000. The number hung in the air, thick and ugly. 12,000, not a few bucks, not a little help, but a specific, calculated sum. I had practiced this, in the car, in the shower for the last 3 days. I had rehearsed this moment. I set my fork down carefully, the small sound loud in the quiet room. "Vivian, I can't," I said. The metallic scraping of Arthur's knife against his plate stopped. "I just moved," I continued, my voice tighter than I wanted, but steady. "The deposit on my new place, the movers, it was expensive. I finally started an emergency fund, like a real one. I don't have that kind of disposable cash right now. I can't finance the wedding." I said can't. I meant won't. For the first time, I meant it. Arthur's face flushed a deep, mottled red. The mask of the welcoming father vanished, replaced by the familiar look of profound, performative disappointment. "Sable," he said, his voice low and guttural. "What is the point? What was the point of all of it? This family raised you. We supported you. What is the point of that, if not for times like this?" Raised me, the words were a joke. Supported me, the bank statements stacked in my apartment desk drawer, detailing 6 years of loans and help that only ever flowed in one direction, would argue otherwise. I looked at him, at the man who was supposed to be my protector, now acting as her primary enforcer. "This isn't a time like this, Dad. This isn't a medical emergency. This is a wedding venue deposit." "Don't," Vivian whispered. I turned to her. The manufactured smile was gone, replaced by a thin white line. Her hand had crept up to her collarbone, a familiar gesture, the prelude to the performance. "Sable, don't upset your mother," Arthur warned, his voice rising. "I'm not your mother," Vivian corrected him, her voice suddenly sharp as glass. Then it softened instantly, melting into a pathetic, fragile tremor. "Don't do this, Sable. Please, you know my heart. It's weak. All this stress. I just want my daughter to be happy. Is that so much to ask?" Her eyes welled with manufactured tears. It was a masterpiece of emotional extortion, a play she had run 1,000 times. I looked at Lena. She was picking at the skin around her thumbnail, refusing to look up. She wouldn't even defend her own wedding. Bryce, however, leaned back, that smirk widening. He was enjoying the floor show. I felt cold. The manipulation was so blatant, so practiced. It was almost boring. I had no fight left in me, just a profound sense of exhaustion. I was 29 years old. This was not family. This was a shakedown. "I am not paying for it," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the anger they wanted. "The answer is no." I did not see the movement. It was shockingly fast. Vivian lunged across the corner of the table. Her hand, heavy with rings, cracked across my face. The sound was loud, a wet, sharp smack that echoed in the overly formal dining room. My head snapped to the side. The entire room went utterly silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the rain tapping against the window. Arthur stared, his mouth half open. Lena let out a tiny gasp and put her hand over her mouth, her eyes finally wide and fixed on me. My cheek throbbed, a hot, stinging pain that radiated out to my ear. Vivian stood there, panting slightly, her chest heaving. The picture of the aggrieved victim who had been pushed too far. "Well," she hissed, her voice trembling with adrenaline and rage. "You needed to be quieted. You were becoming hysterical." The shock was immediate, but it wasn't the pain that paralyzed me. It was the realization, the click. This was the pattern, the demand, the refusal, the emotional blackmail, and now, the escalation, the final tool to ensure compliance when the others failed. My vision tunneled, the room blurred at the edges. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, a panic attack climbing up my chest, hot and fast. I couldn't breathe. Tears flooded my eyes, blurring the sight of Vivian's furious face, Arthur's shocked into silence expression, and Lena's horrified stare. The tears weren't from the sting on my cheek. They were from the grotesque clarity of it all. I was their asset, and I had just defaulted. "Sable," Arthur started, his voice uncertain, finally broken from his stupor. I couldn't speak. I pushed my chair back. It shrieked against the hardwood floor, a sound of pure protest. I tried, but only a choked sob came out. I turned and ran. I didn't go for the front door. I went for the only place I ever felt safe in this house, the only place that was still hers. I fled the dining room, past the living room where my mother's piano used to be, and wrenched open the door to the basement. I stumbled down the old wooden steps into the darkness, slamming the heavy door shut behind me. The old lock clicked, more from habit than security. Above me, I heard muted, shocked voices, and then, horrifyingly, the sound of a fork clicking against a plate, a murmur. The dinner was resuming. My back slid down the rough wood of the door. I sat on the cold concrete floor in the pitch black. I was hyperventilating, dragging in air that smelled of dust, mildew, and my mother's old cedar chests. It was cold. My cheek was on fire. I covered my mouth with both hands to muffle the sounds that were tearing out of my throat, the awful, racking sobs. My fingers fumbled along the wall, searching for the old, rotary light switch. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely control it. My fingernails scraped against the dry plaster. I finally found the switch. I twisted it. A single, bare bulb flickered to life, casting a weak, yellow glow over the cluttered space, illuminating the ghosts of my real mother's life, packed away in boxes. The single bulb hummed, its weak light illuminating clouds of dust motes that danced in the cold. Still air. I sat on the concrete, my back pressed against the splintered wood of the basement door, my legs drawn up to my chest. My cheek was a hot, tight map of pain. The tears had stopped, replaced by a chilling clarity. This wasn't a home. It was a hostile environment, and I had been confusing compliance with love for 6 years. This basement was the only part of the house Vivian had never bothered to colonize. It was my mother's sanctuary, and now, her archive. The air smelled of her, cedar, old books, and a faint, lingering trace of her lavender soap. Sitting here, surrounded by her neatly labeled boxes, the past didn't just resurface, it unspooled, sharp and chronological. The first memory was funeral black. I was 23, standing numb in this very house, which was then filled with casseroles and quiet, awkward mourners. Vivian had arrived not as a guest, but as an occupying force. Arthur, my father, was a ghost, hollowed out by grief. Vivian, then just a close family friend, had swooped in. I remembered her hands, covered in rings, rubbing my back in what she called comfort. It felt proprietary. "Arthur, darling, you can't be expected to manage," she had whispered, loud enough for me and Aunt Evelyn to hear. "Let me handle the household accounts, just until you're on your feet." That was the beachhead. Within a month, she had moved in. Within 6, they were married. And on the very day of my mother's funeral, while I was still trying to remember how to breathe, Vivian had sat me down at the kitchen table. "We need to be practical. Sable," she'd said, her voice dripping with synthetic sympathy. "Your mother was, let's say, not the best with money. We're going to have new rules for household expenses to keep things stable for your father." At 23, I mistook her control for competence. I was grateful. I was a fool. The real hemorrhage began when I was 25. Arthur lost his job at the engineering firm. Downsizing, he'd mumbled, his shame so thick it was suffocating. I had just landed my first good job as a data analyst. I had savings. I felt a surge of daughterly duty. "It's just for a few months, Sab," he'd promised. Using my childhood nickname, it felt like a violation. "Just until I get my severance sorted and land something new. Help us cover the mortgage." So I did. The first transfer was $3,000. It felt good, in a sick way, responsible, adult. But the few months stretched into a year. Arthur never seemed to find a new position. He consulted, he said, but no checks ever seemed to materialize. Vivian, however, found her calling. She became the gatekeeper of my father's dignity, and the conduit for all financial requests. The text became a drumbeat in my life. Need 400, utilities. 750, property tax. The car's transmission is gone, quoted at 2,000. The requests were always urgent, always framed as a catastrophe I was uniquely positioned to solve. I paid. I paid to keep the peace. I paid to keep my father from looking broken. I paid because I was conditioned to believe this was what a good daughter did. Then the requests grew bolder and vaguer. Invoices were never attached. We had a hospital scare, just the copay, 1,800. The roof has a major leak, quoted 3,000. I never saw the leak. I never saw the hospital bill. I just saw the void in my bank account. The first time I hesitated, the real tools came out. I was saving for a down payment on a small condo. A text came in. 5,000, dental emergency. Vivian, that's a lot, I typed back, my hands shaking. Can it wait 2 weeks until I get my bonus? The reply was instant. Don't bother. I'll figure it out. I just hope the stress doesn't trigger anything. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Vivian. Her voice was a reedy, frail thing, punctuated by sharp, theatrical gasps. Sable, I can't catch my breath. It's my heart. The pressure. Arthur is so worried. I told him not to worry. That you'd help. Guilt, hot and acidic, flooded my system. What if she really was sick? What if my refusal, my selfishness over a condo, caused her to have a heart attack? I sent the $5,000. The dental emergency was never mentioned again. This became the pattern. Any pushback, any request for details, was met with a medical crisis. Her weak heart, her shortness of breath, her spells. She weaponized her own mortality to empty my pockets, and my father, standing right beside her, endorsed the performance with his silence. I became Sable, the mobile bank, the family ATM. My successes weren't mine. They were theirs. My promotion meant they could afford a new patio set. My bonus meant Lena, who had moved in with them, could get a new laptop. I wasn't a person. I was a resource. I lived in a constant, low-grade fog of guilt, terrified that if I said no and the worst happened, it would be my fault. My best friend, Kira, saw it. We'd meet for coffee, and I'd be transparent with exhaustion, stressed about my own bills after covering theirs. Sable, you have to stop, she told me, her voice blunt with concern. This isn't help. This is financial abuse. I recoiled. You don't understand, I snapped, defensive. She's sick. My dad's struggling. It's my family. I can't just abandon them. They're abandoning you, she argued. They're adults. They are bleeding you dry. What happens when you have nothing left? I stopped talking to her about it. I couldn't bear to hear the truth. Admitting she was right meant I would have to do something, and doing something meant risking the one thing I was terrified to lose, what little I had left of my family. The estrangement from my mother's side was gradual, then complete. My Aunt Evelyn, my mother's sister, had tried. She called me after the wedding. Sable, I'm worried. Arthur isn't himself. And this woman, she's wearing your mother's pearls. The last time I saw her was at a disastrous Christmas 2 years ago. Vivian was wearing my mother's favorite cocktail ring. I said nothing. Evelyn saw it and confronted Arthur. The fight was quiet but brutal. She called Vivian a grifter and my father a coward. She looked at me, her eyes full of my mother's disappointment. You're just letting her erase your mother. You're helping her do it. I didn't defend myself. I just froze. Evelyn left, and she never called me again. I was alone, isolated on their island. The breaking point was 3 months ago. I had to cancel a long overdue vacation, my first in 4 years, because Vivian had another medical emergency that required a $2,000 specialist fee. I was sitting in my apartment, looking at the non-refundable flight confirmation, and I just broke. I found a therapist online, Dr. Alani, a kind woman with sharp eyes who didn't let me get away with my own excuses. In our first session, I laid out the history, framing it as my duty, my burden. She listened patiently. Then she folded her hands and said the words that cracked my world open. Sable, what you are describing is not duty. It is a classic pattern of gaslighting and emotional blackmail. You have been systematically manipulated for financial control. It was the same thing Kira had said, but this time I was ready to hear it. Doctor, Alani's first assignment was simple. Don't say no, not yet, just track. Write down every single request and every single dollar. So I did. I bought a dedicated journal. I started logging the texts, the calls, the transfers. I went back through my bank statements. 6 years. The numbers climbed. They were staggering. The few months of mortgage help had become a permanent, parasitic drain. The list was pages long, a terrifying, itemized account of my own destruction. 100,000, 150. It just kept going. I realized I didn't even know the total. I was too afraid to add it up. Tonight, when Vivian asked for $12,000, it wasn't just a request. It was an entry in the log. When my father shamed me, it wasn't a rebuke. It was a data point in the pattern. And then, the slap. As the sting on my cheek cooled to a dull, throbbing ache, something in my brain fused. The shock, the panic, the tears. They weren't just the reaction of a victim anymore. They were the last vestiges of the fog burning away. The switch had flipped. The woman cowering in the basement, crying over a slap, was gone. In her place was an observer, a witness. The victim had just become the prosecution. And this basement, my mother's archive, was no longer a hiding place. It was about to become an arsenal. I pushed myself up from the cold concrete floor. The throbbing in my cheek had subsided to a dull, hot ache, a physical reminder of the boundary that had just been crossed. The panic was gone, burned away by the humiliation, leaving behind a sharp, Arctic calm. The single bulb above cast long, distorted shadows, making the stacks of boxes look like a silent, waiting jury. This basement was my mother's territory, the last unconquered part of the house. Vivian never came down here. She claimed the dust aggravated her delicate constitution. Surrounded by my mother's neatly labeled past, I felt a sudden, urgent need to find something real, a piece of my life that hadn't been curated by Vivian. My eyes scanned the shelves, past holiday ornaments and college textbooks. My gaze landed on a sturdy banker's box tucked under a workbench. The label, written in my mother's elegant, precise cursive, read, Insurance, Bank. My heart gave a heavy thump. I dragged the box out. The tape was old, and it split with a dry, tearing sound. The air released a smell of aging paper and leather. Inside, things were meticulously organized. Old passbooks for savings accounts closed decades ago, expired insurance policies, and then a thick manila folder. I opened it. It wasn't full of documents. It was full of photographs of documents. My mother, ever cautious, must have kept a record. Pictures of thick, notarized pages, headers bearing the name of a private bank I didn't recognize. The top page had a title embossed in heavy black letters, The Belmont Family Trust. Belmont, my mother's maiden name, the family my father dismissed as stiff-necked and Vivian openly despised as snobs, the wealthy, powerful side of my family, the side I had been systematically steered away from since my mother's death. Tucked beneath the photographs was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was unopened. My name, Sable Arden, was written on the front in a strong, unfamiliar hand. The return address was an office in Cherry Creek, a prestigious high-rise. The sender, Horace Belmont. My grandfather, the reclusive, formidable head of Belmont Capital, a man my father claimed wanted nothing to do with us, a man I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. My fingers trembled as I tore the seal. The letter must have arrived in the chaos after my mother's funeral, and Vivian, in her haste to erase my mother's life, had likely just tossed this box into the basement, unopened, a fatal mistake. The letter was dated 11 years ago, just after my 18th birthday. My dear Sable, it began, The voice was crisp, formal, devoid of warmth, but radiating authority. Your mother has informed me of your acceptance to university to ensure your future stability and independence. I have established an educational and entrepreneurial trust fund in your name, seeded with an initial $50,000. It is intended for tuition, expenses, and to provide a significant nest egg upon your graduation. As you are still a minor for certain banking procedures, and given the legal complexities, I have listed your father, Arthur Arden, as the temporary custodian of the account. His access is limited to managing verified educational withdrawals until you reach the age of 21, at which point full control reverts to you. My breath hitched. A $50,000 nest egg. Attached to the letter were the initial account statements. There was the deposit. There were the first few withdrawals, precisely matching the tuition payments my scholarships hadn't covered. And then, the withdrawals changed. They started the year I turned 20, just after my mother's diagnosis, when she was weak. Withdrawal, $5,000, memo, household. 3 months later, withdrawal, $10,000, memo, medical. A month after her funeral, while I was numb with grief, withdrawal, $7,500, memo, repairs. Periodic, consistent, and not for my education. The balance dwindled. By the time I turned 22, a year after I supposedly had full control of an account I never knew existed, it was empty. This was it. This was the blueprint. This wasn't just them extorting my paycheck. This was theft. They had drained my inheritance, my mother's provision, my grandfather's gift. They had practiced on this fund, honed their methods, and when it was dry, they had turned their sights on my salary. The roof repairs, the medical scares. It was a script they had been running for almost a decade. I pulled out my phone. The adrenaline was sharp and cold. My hands were perfectly steady. I balanced the documents one by one on top of a dusty trunk. I turned on my phone's flash, the bright white light cutting through the yellow gloom. I photographed everything. The envelope, the letter, page by page, every single statement, capturing the dates, the amounts, the memos, the horrifying final zero. I was swiping through the images, checking for clarity, when a new sound cut through the silence. It was not the enraged hammering I expected on the door I was leaning against. It was a quiet, firm tap, tap. It came from the far side of the basement, from the slanted metal Bilko doors that led up to the backyard. My blood turned to ice. No one ever used that door. It was stiff, half-rusted, and led to the darkest, most overgrown part of the yard. I stood motionless. The rain drummed on the metal above. Tap, 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 more insistent. Sable? The voice was deep, aged, and cut through the damp air like a razor. A voice of absolute authority. My heart hammered against my ribs. I navigated the maze of my mother's discarded things, my shoes shuffling in the dust. I reached the concrete steps leading up to the rusted metal hatch. "Who is it?" My voice was a shaky whisper. "It's Horace Belmont. Open the door. We have an immediate problem." I fumbled with the heavy, rusted deadbolt. It shrieked in protest before sliding back. I pushed the heavy, spring-loaded door. It lifted with a groan, opening a narrow triangle to the black, rain-lashed night. He stood there, silhouetted against the storm. Horace Belmont. He was exactly as I remembered him from my mother's funeral. Tall, immaculate, radiating an aura of cold, immense power. He wore a dark wool overcoat, gleaming with rain. His silver hair was perfect. He looked indestructible. His eyes, pale, penetrating blue, found mine in the dimness. They were not comforting. They were assessing, and they were furious. "Grandfather?" "Let me in," he commanded, not asked. He moved past me down the steps, pulling the heavy door shut behind him. The sound was a final, metallic thud that sealed us in. He shook the rain from his coat, his gaze sweeping the cluttered basement before landing on me. His eyes dropped to my cheek, where the red imprint of Vivian's hand was still starkly visible. His jaw tightened. "I see," he said, his voice a low growl. "I'm late." "How did you know I was here? In the basement?" "I didn't," he said curtly. "I came for them." He gestured toward the ceiling, where the faint sounds of the dinner party had resumed. "I assumed I would find you upstairs, playing the role of the compliant family asset. Finding you down here is illuminating." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat. He wasn't pulling out a wallet. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a bank notification. "I received this alert 48 hours ago. While I have excised your father from my life, I have not been so foolish as to excise you from my accounts. Your name is flagged on every Belmont Trust index. I get an alert for any significant inquiry." He unfolded the paper. "Someone applied for a $200,000 line of credit this week. They attempted to use your vested future inheritance from my estate as collateral." I couldn't breathe. 200,000. The 12,000 they demanded tonight. It wasn't for a wedding deposit. It was a broker's fee. It was to secure the fraudulent loan. The bank, of course, recognized the signature as a forgery. Horace continued, his voice like chipping ice. "A clumsy one, but the application's IP address originated from this house. They were trying to leverage your future to pay for their immediate debts." "I just found this," I whispered, my voice trembling. I held up the letter I had just photographed. "The trust fund, the 50,000, they stole it all." Horace looked at the letter, then back at my face. The anger in his eyes sharpened, calcified. "So, it's worse than I thought. They've been bleeding you since you were a child." A muffled shout echoed from the floor above us, Arthur's voice, thick and slurred. "She can't just say no. Who does she think she is? She owes us." Vivian's reply was sharp, sibilant. "Arthur, be quiet. You're drunk. She's just having a tantrum. She's down there feeling sorry for herself. She's soft. She's terrified of being alone." My grandfather's head snapped up. He moved with a speed that belied his age, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the deep shadows behind a towering stack of trunks. "Be still," he commanded. The voices from the dining room filtered clearly through the floorboards. "She'll come around," Vivian continued, her voice now calm, confident, reptilian. "I'll call her tomorrow. I'll cry. I'll tell her the stress is making my heart flutter. She will apologize. She always does." A pause, the sound of a glass being set down heavily. "And if she doesn't?" Arthur challenged. "You hit her. Viv, that was stupid." "It was necessary," she snapped. "And if she doesn't apologize, we escalate. We use the new credit cards, the ones that came last week, the loan application. Her signature is already on them. If she won't be a dutiful daughter, she can be a co-conspirator. She won't risk her career or a fraud investigation. Arthur, we just need to handle her correctly. She will break. She always breaks." My stomach turned to lead. New credit cards. They had already committed identity theft. Horace looked at me in the dimness. His face was a mask of cold fury. He reached into his coat pocket again and produced a small, silver digital recorder. He pressed a button. A tiny red light glowed. He held it up, angling it toward the ceiling. He leaned in, his mouth so close to my ear I could feel his breath. "We are not just defending, Sable," he whispered. "We are going on offense." We left the house through the basement. Horace's hand was firm on my back, guiding me up the rusted steps and into the driving rain. I didn't look back at the red brick house. I didn't have my purse, my keys, or my coat. It didn't matter. I got into the front seat of his Bentley, a car so quiet, it felt insulated from the world. He didn't speak. He simply drove me to a hotel in Cherry Creek, a place where the lobby was silent and smelled of old money and wood smoke. He procured a key to a suite without seeming to even speak to the front desk. "You are safe here," he said, handing me the key card. "No one knows this address. Order room service. Sleep. I will be back at 8 a.m. We are seeing my lawyer." Sleep didn't come. I stood at the window, 12 floors up, watching the storm wash the city clean. I was vibrating with a toxic cocktail of adrenaline, rage, and a terrifying, profound sense of violation. The recording from Horace's silver device played in my mind. If she won't be a dutiful daughter, she can be a co-conspirator. She will break. She always breaks. I was still wearing my dinner clothes when Horace knocked at 8 a.m. sharp. He looked immaculate, as if he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. "We go now," he said. The law offices of Quinn and Associates were in a different glass tower, one that seemed to pierce the morning after the storm clouds. The reception area was stark white, with a single, massive, vibrant, abstract painting. A woman who looked to be in her early 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun, met us in the lobby. She wore a navy blue dress that looked more like armor than clothing. "Horace," she said, her voice crisp. "This must be her." "Marla, this is my granddaughter, Sable Arden," Horace said. "We have a situation." Marla Quinn's office was a corner unit with 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling glass. It was minimalist, organized, and terrifyingly clean. She gestured to the chairs. "Talk." Horace didn't sit. He stood by the window. "Sable is the victim of long-term financial abuse, emotional extortion, and, as of this week, felonious identity theft, perpetrated by her father, Arthur Arden, and his wife, Vivian Cole." Marla looked at me. Her gaze was not sympathetic. It was focused, like a surgeon assessing a patient. "Start from last night. Tell me everything." I told her. The demand for $12,000, the refusal, the slap, the flight to the basement, the trust fund I found, the $50,000 that was gone, Horace's arrival, the loan application for $200,000. And then, Horace placed the small silver recorder on her desk. "And this," he said, "the conversation that took place after she went downstairs." Marla plugged the recorder into her computer. She listened, her expression unmoving. She listened to Vivian's plan. Arthur's drunken agreement, the discussion of my softness, and the chilling confirmation. We used the new credit cards, the ones that came last week. When it finished, Marla was silent for a moment, then she looked at me. "Colorado is a one-party consent state. This recording is admissible evidence. Sable, what I'm about to tell you is not advice. It's a plan. We are going to lock down your life, and then we are going to dismantle theirs. It will be procedural, it will be cold, and it will be fast." She hit a button on her desk phone. "Sarah, get me the fraud resolution departments at Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, in that order, now." For the next hour, I was on the phone, Marla guiding me, her voice firm in my ear. "State your name. State your social security number. State clearly. I am reporting active identity theft, and I am filing a police report today. Use the phrase, fraudulent accounts." We placed an extended fraud alert and a full credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. It was like slamming 3 steel doors, one after another. "Now," Marla said, swiveling to her computer. "With the freeze in place, we pull your full report. Let's see what they've been doing." She turned the monitor. My stomach hollowed out. It was all there. 2 revolving credit accounts, she said, pointing. Opened 22 days ago, combined limit of $30,000. Both cards were mailed to your father's address in Lakewood. My mind reeled. The new cards from the recording. "And this," she continued, her finger tracing down the screen. "A personal loan, $25,000, opened 18 months ago." 18 months, I whispered. I remembered that summer. Vivian had a rare infection. Arthur said they needed $5,000 for a specialist, but the specialist's office wouldn't take their insurance. They claimed they had to take out a high-interest loan. They didn't. They made me take one out. "The statements for all 3 accounts are being sent to your father's address," Marla said. "They were intercepting the mail. You were never meant to see this. This is felony-level identity theft, bank fraud, mail fraud." She printed a stack of affidavits. "You will fill these out, declaring these accounts as fraudulent. This begins the process of separating you from the debt. We will file a police report this afternoon. We will subpoena the original applications from the banks. We're looking for signatures. But more importantly, we're looking for the digital footprint, the IP address. I'm betting they were stupid enough to apply from their own home. While I sat at her conference table, my hand shaking as I signed my name over and over, Horace was on his own phone, speaking in a low, cold voice. "Dennis, it's Horace Belmont. I need you to pull the archived records for a defunct trust. Belmont Minor Trust, ending in 409A. Yes, Sables. I need the full transaction ledger, from inception to close. I am specifically interested in the large sum withdrawals. Find out where that money went. I want a name." He listened, his back to me, looking out at the mountains. "An LLC? Spell it." He wrote on Marla's notepad and slid it across the desk. "Cole and Arden Holdings, LLC." Marla Quinn typed the name into a state database. The record populated instantly. "Here it is, incorporated 6 years ago, just after they were married. Registered agent, Vivian Cole, secondary principal, Arthur Arden. Stated purpose of business, estate and household consulting." "They were laundering the money," Marla said, her voice flat. "The money they stole from your trust, and likely every dollar they've extorted from you since. They'd transfer it to this business account, then pay themselves a consulting fee or buy personal items as business expenses. It makes the theft look like legitimate income. It's sophisticated. It's premeditated." Horace hung up his phone. "Dennis confirms. All non-tuition withdrawals from your trust were transferred directly to that LLC." Marla turned to me. The surgical focus was still there. "Horace and I will handle the financial forensics. Your task is just as important. You are going to build the human case, the coercion." "My log," I said, my therapist's words echoing in my head. "More than a log," Marla said. "A timeline. I want a spreadsheet. Column A, date and amount of every transfer you sent them. Column B, the text message, email, or phone call that prompted it. Column C, the stated emergency. Column D, the punishment if you hesitated, the chest pains, the guilt trips, the family duty speeches. We will create a document that shows a pattern of systematic emotional blackmail. We will prove, beyond any doubt, that your compliance was coerced." That afternoon, I called Kira. I couldn't go back to my apartment, not knowing if they had a key. We met at the Tattered Cover bookstore, a public place. I sat her down and told her everything. She listened, her coffee growing cold. Her face, usually so warm, hardened. "Sable," she said, her voice low and furious, "I am going to help you burn them to the ground." For the next 6 hours, we were a 2-woman forensic unit. Kira, a graphic designer, was brilliant at data visualization. I pulled my text history. I opened my bank statements. We cross-referenced. "Look," she said, pointing. "March 4th, 2 years ago. Text from Vivian. Need 2,000. Roof. Then, your reply. Can't right now. So tight. Then, an hour later, a record of a 30-minute phone call from your father, and 10 minutes after that, your bank transfer for $2,000. That was the "you're ungrateful" speech, I murmured, the memory making me sick. "We put it in," she said. "We built the document, page after page, screenshots of texts, bank transfers, Venmo payments. We laid them side by side, the request, the refusal, the pressure, the payment. It was a 6-year history of my own capitulation. At the end, we attached the full certified transcription of the basement recording. The 40-page PDF was a portrait of calculated cruelty. I emailed it to Marla. Her reply came in under a minute. "This is it. This is the weapon. I am scheduling the meeting." The next morning, a process server delivered a package to the red brick house in Lakewood. It was a formal letter of legal notice. "It's a preservation of evidence notice," Marla explained to me on the phone. "It informs them that a legal dispute is active. If they delete a single text, email, or financial file, it will be considered spoliation of evidence, and we can get a default judgment." "It traps them," I said. It pins them, she corrected. It also instructs them to appear in my office this Thursday, 9 a.m., and they are instructed to bring their complete personal and business financial records, including all statements for Cole and Arden Holdings, for the last 3 years. Will they come? Won't they just hire a lawyer? Oh, they'll come, Marla said, a cold smile in her voice. They're not afraid of you. They're arrogant. They'll come to handle me. They'll walk in here thinking they have all the power. They have no idea that we have already built the cage. That night, Horace and I had dinner at his hotel. He was quiet, reviewing the full report from his accountant. Marla's plan is excellent, he said finally. She will present them with the evidence of their identity theft, the recording, and your timeline. She will offer them a settlement to avoid criminal charges. This is the smart, clean, legal approach. It relies on them being afraid. And if they're not? I asked. If they call her bluff? Horace folded his hands. That is why I am attending. Marla is a scalpel. I am a hammer. Marla is unaware of one small piece of information I discovered 2 days ago. When I first looked into their finances after the loan application, I have not told her, because I want to keep it in reserve. It is my ace. What is it? Your father and his wife are broke, Horace said, his voice flat. The reason they needed that $200,000 loan so badly was not just to cover the fraudulent credit cards, it was to stop a foreclosure. They are 6 months delinquent on their home mortgage. He looked at me, his eyes like chips of ice. They think they are coming on Thursday to negotiate their terms, but I have a small addendum in my will, a clause I added years ago, that Marla doesn't know about, a clause that activates under specific circumstances which, as of last night, have been met. They think they're walking in to discuss your money. They are, in fact, walking in to discuss their own survival. The silence that followed the delivery of Marla's legal notice was a coiled, breathing thing. It lasted less than 24 hours. On Tuesday morning, the counteroffensive began. It wasn't a legal response. It was social. Vivian, cornered, reverted to her primary weapon, the narrative. My phone, which I had retrieved from my apartment along with a hastily packed suitcase, began to light up. I was in the hotel suite Horace had secured, a sterile, quiet room that felt like a fortress. The first call was from a distant aunt on my father's side, a woman I hadn't spoken to in at least a year. "Sable, darling," she began, her voice thick with a syrupy, rehearsed concern. "I just spoke to poor Vivian. She is simply devastated. She's beside herself. We are all just so worried about you. She said you've changed, that you're under some kind of terrible influence, to just abandon your father like this, Sable, when he's struggling. It's just not like you." I listened, my knuckles white on the phone. "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Clara." I hung up. The call was a template. 3 more followed in the next hour, all from relatives, all echoing the same script. Sable is ungrateful. Sable is abandoning her family. Vivian is worried sick. Arthur is heartbroken. Vivian was conducting her orchestra of flying monkeys, painting me as a cold, monstrous, ungrateful daughter who had turned her back on the people who raised her. When the calls from relatives failed to generate the desired response, my groveling apology, Vivian deployed her next asset. A text message from Lena lit up my screen. "Sable, you have to call this off. You don't know what you're doing. Mom is a complete wreck. She hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. She's having spells all morning. Her heart. She keeps saying her heart hurts. You are literally making her sick." I read the words. Her heart. The familiar, rusted-out weapon. I felt a hollow, cold space where the guilt used to live. It was such a predictable, tired performance. I was about to put the phone down when a second text from Lena buzzed. "Bryce is furious. The caterer is going to cancel on us if we don't get them the deposit by tomorrow. We just need the $12,000. Please, just send the $12,000 and this can all go away. Whatever this is, it's not worth this. You're ruining everything." There it was, the demand. Nestled inside the emotional blackmail, the transactional nature of our relationship, laid bare, send the money, and the sickness, the heartbreak, the drama, it all just disappears. I held my thumb over the screen. I thought about the girl in the basement, crying in the dark. I thought about the trust fund, drained to zero. I thought about the recording of Vivian, her voice cold and reptilian. She's soft. She always breaks. I typed one word. No. I hit send. The response was immediate, as if I had thrown a rock at a hornet's nest. The social pressure and the emotional proxies had failed. Now, it was time for intimidation. My phone rang. The caller ID was Carlos, BLDG manager. I answered. Ms. Arden? This is Carlos. From the front desk. He sounded stressed. Listen, there's a man here, in the lobby. He says he's your father. My blood ran cold. He is, Carlos. Do not let him in my apartment. I haven't. I won't, Carlos said, his voice dropping. But Ms. Arden, he's causing a scene. He's demanding a key to your unit. He's yelling at Maria at the desk. He's telling everyone you're unstable and not in your right mind, and that he needs to get in to check on your welfare. He's scaring the other tenants. Carlos, he is harassing you. I am so sorry. Please, tell him you will call the police if he doesn't leave the property. Already did, Carlos said, his voice grim. He called Maria a name I can't repeat, and then stormed out. But, Ms. Arden, just so you know, our lobby security cameras got the whole thing, clear as day. His face, him yelling, him trying to push past the desk. It's all on the drive if you need it. Thank you, Carlos. Yes, please, save that footage. I went back to my apartment building late that night. I needed my mail. The lobby was quiet. Carlos met me and, without a word, handed me a small USB drive. He was here for 10 minutes. It's all on there. I took the elevator up. My apartment felt strange, violated, and there, jammed so hard under my door that it had torn, was a piece of yellow legal paper. My father's handwriting, thick, angry, black-inked. You owe us. You are ungrateful. You are destroying this family. You listen to that old bastard Belmont and you'll end up with nothing. You fix this. I didn't crumple it. I didn't cry. I laid it flat on my kitchen counter. My hands perfectly steady. I took out my phone and photographed it, the white light of the flash illuminating the deep indents of the pen. I forwarded the photo and the video file from Carlos to Marla Quinn. Her reply was simple. Added to the file. See you Thursday. The next day, Wednesday, Horace made his counter move. It was brilliant. It was silent. It was devastating. Vivian's entire identity, her social currency, was built on her role as a philanthropist. She was on the junior board of the Children's Literacy Fund, a position that gave her access to the wives of Denver's elite. It was her entire world. Horace, as he told me later, happened to have lunch at the Fortnight Club, a quiet, old-money establishment where deals were done and reputations were quietly made or broken. He happened to run into Eleanor Vance, the chairwoman of the fund. He didn't gossip. He didn't accuse. He expressed grave concern. I could picture it. Horace, his voice low and somber. Eleanor, wonderful to see you. I'm afraid I'm not here on pleasant business. I am in the process of handling a very delicate family matter for my granddaughter. Sable, you remember my late daughter, Eleanor's child. It has come to my attention that she has been the long-term victim of a highly sophisticated campaign of financial abuse. We've uncovered identity theft, coercion, a truly heartbreaking situation, all perpetrated by those who were meant to be her caretakers. He would have let the name hang in the air, unspoken. He wouldn't have had to say Vivian Cole. Eleanor was smart. She knew who Sable's caretaker was. I am simply devastated for the girl, Horace would conclude, and of course, for the reputation of anyone who might have been, even tangentially, associated with such predatory behavior. The poison was administered. It was precise, targeted, and delivered to the queen bee of Vivian's hive. By 3 p.m., the narrative that Vivian had spent 2 days constructing had not just been neutralized, it had been reversed and set on fire. The rumor mill didn't just turn, it spun. It was no longer ungrateful daughter abandons family. It was Horace Belmont's granddaughter discovered to be victim of long-term financial abuse by stepmother. The social fallout was immediate. The first casualty was the wedding. Bryce's family, upwardly mobile and obsessed with appearances, was not about to be linked to a financial scandal involving one of Denver's most powerful and ruthless old money families. My phone rang. It was Lena. I let it go to voicemail. The message that came through was not a text. It was a raw, primal scream of panic. Sable, you have to pick up. Bryce's parents. They're pulling out. They called my mom. They said they won't be associated with this kind of drama or people like us. He's postponing. Sable. He's calling it off. He said I lied to him. This is your fault. You did this. There was a sound of her sobbing, a desperate, ragged gasp for air. Just tell them it's not true. Tell your grandfather to stop. Tell him to make a call. Mom said this was all a misunderstanding. She was managing your money for you. You let her. You said it was okay. You told her she could. Tell them, Sable. Tell them you lied. The panic was breathtaking. The realization was dawning on her. She wasn't just a bystander. She was collateral. Her entire future, the wedding she'd been planning, was evaporating because Vivian's house of cards was falling. With her social world in flames and her daughter's future imploding, Vivian made her last, desperate move. An email appeared in my inbox. The subject line, "Please, Sable, just us." The email was a masterpiece of emotional theater. My dearest Sable, my heart is broken. This has all been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. These lawyers, your grandfather, they don't understand our family. They don't understand what we've been through. The grief we shared. I have only ever loved you as my own daughter. I have only ever tried to protect you. I beg you, let's meet, just you and me, at the house, or for coffee, wherever you want. We can fix this in 5 minutes if the lawyers just get out of the way. They are blowing this out of proportion for money. Please, I am so sick with worry. I can barely stand. I love you. Vivian. I felt the old pull, the familiar deep-seated urge to make the conflict stop, the exhaustion, the flicker of, what if? What if I just met her? What if I just made it go away? I took a deep breath. I forwarded the email to Marla Quinn. Marla's response came in under 60 seconds. Absolutely not. This is a classic trap. She is desperate. She wants to get you alone, off the record, and manipulate you into recanting or muddying the waters. She is terrified of the evidence, and she is terrified of Thursday's meeting. You will only see her in this office, with me and a stenographer present. Do not reply. I closed the email. I sat in the quiet hotel room. The phone was silent. The first wave of the war was over. Their social world was burning. Their daughter's wedding was gone. Their intimidation tactics had been recorded. I looked at the folder on my laptop where I was saving all the evidence. The video file of my father, the photo of his threatening note, the audio file of Lena's hysterical, incriminating voicemail, the PDF of Vivian's desperate, manipulative email. My hands were steady. The old anxiety was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I was no longer the girl in the basement. I had learned a terrible, clarifying lesson from them. Every time they threatened me, every time they lied, every time they tried to scare me, they were not hurting me. They were just handing me another piece of evidence. Each desperate message was just another nail for their own coffin. Thursday, 9 a.m. The conference room at Marla Quinn's office was a glass box in the sky. It overlooked the city, but the view felt sterile, just concrete and sharp angles. The table was a long expanse of polished, dark wood that reflected the harsh fluorescent lights. It was cold to the touch. I sat on one side, flanked by Horace and Marla. Horace was as still as granite, his hands folded on the table, radiating an impenetrable, expensive silence. Marla was arranging 3 thin file folders in front of her, not the mountain of evidence we had built, just 3 tidy files. I had expected a banker's box, but this was more terrifying. It was selective. It was precise. My heart was a cold bird beating against my ribs. I had dressed in my most severe work clothes, a black suit I usually saved for board presentations. I felt like a child playing dress-up, but my reflection in the dark glass showed a woman who looked pale, rigid, and cold. They were late, exactly 4 minutes late, a deliberate, petty assertion of control. The door opened, and they walked in. They did not look scared. They looked furious. Vivian was dressed for war. She wore a sharp, ivory-white suit, her hair perfectly sculpted, her face a mask of indignation. She smelled overwhelmingly of Chanel, an olfactory invasion of the sterile room. Arthur followed in her wake, his face blotchy and red, his suit jacket straining. He was trying to project menace, but he just looked swollen and uncomfortable. They didn't look at me, not at first. They directed all their attention to Marla, as if I were a misbehaving child who had brought in a principal. "We are here," Vivian announced, her voice brittle. "Against the advice of our counsel. I might add, we are here to put a stop to this nonsense." They sat opposite us. The expanse of dark wood between us felt like a mile-wide chasm. Marla Quinn did not smile. She did not introduce herself. She simply folded her hands on top of the first file. "Thank you for coming. We have a great deal to discuss. So I will be brief. We are here to address a series of criminal actions perpetrated against my client, Ms. Arden." "Now you listen here," Arthur boomed, leaning forward. "This is a private, You will not interrupt me." "Mr. Arden," Marla said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his manufactured rage like a diamond drill. Arthur snapped his mouth shut, shocked. "File 1, Marla said, sliding the folder open. "Identity theft." She slid a document across the table. It spun slowly and came to a stop in front of Vivian. "This is a copy of the application for a Capital One Visa signature card. Limit of $20,000. Opened 22 days ago, in my client's name." She slid a second paper. "This is the application for an American Express card. Limit of $10,000. Opened on the same day." She slid a third. "And this is the application for a personal loan in the amount of $28,000. Taken out 18 months ago, again, in my client's name. The total fraudulent debt currently attributed to Ms. Arden is $58,450, plus interest." Vivian looked at the papers with disdain. "I have no idea what these are. Sable, this is absurd. Tell them." "Please note the ship to address on all 3 applications," Marla continued, ignoring her. "It is not my client's address in Capitol Hill. It is your address, in Lakewood. We have also subpoenaed the IP logs for the digital applications. They all originate from your home network." Arthur's face went from red to a pasty, unhealthy gray. Vivian's mask of indignation twitched. "File 2, Marla said, opening the next folder. "Assault and coercion." She placed the small silver digital recorder on the center of the table. "You," she said, nodding at Arthur, "have claimed to my client's building manager that this is a family matter. Let's listen to the family dynamic, shall we?" She pressed play. The silence in the room was absolute, and then Vivian's voice, captured in the damp air of the basement, filled the sterile office. It was cold, clear, and reptilian. "She's soft. She's terrified of being alone." Arthur's drunken, slurred agreement. "I'll call her tomorrow. I'll cry. I'll tell her the stress is making my heart flutter. She will apologize. She always does." I watched Vivian. Her face had gone completely white. All the blood had drained from it. She stared at the recorder as if it were a snake. And then, the worst part, her voice, sharp and dismissive, after Arthur had warned her. "She was crying too loud. I had to slap her quiet." Marla pressed stop. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. I looked at my father. He was staring at his hands, his knuckles white. "This is—" Arthur's voice was a low growl. He pushed his chair back and stood up, trying to loom. "This is disgusting. You recorded us? In our own home? This is a family dispute. You have no right. This is private." Marla did not flinch. She looked up at him. "Mr. Arden, when you strike a 29-year-old woman, it is not family business. It is assault. When you conspire to commit wire fraud and file false loan applications, it is not household management. It is a felony. When you use a fabricated medical condition to systematically extort money, as documented in 6 years of my client's bank statements and text messages, it is not a dispute. It is financial coercion. You have no rights here." Arthur looked as if he'd been slapped himself. He sat back down, deflated. Vivian, however, recovered. The shock faded, replaced by a cold, glittering fury. She finally looked at me, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "So this is it," she hissed at me. "After everything we did for you, after I took you in, raised you when your own mother—" "Do not," Horace Belmont said. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was not loud, but it cracked through the room like a whip. Vivian flinched and physically recoiled, her mouth snapping shut. He did not look at her. He continued to stare at the wall in front of him. The message was clear. "You do not exist." "File 3, Marla said, opening the last one. "The settlement." She slid a single, multi-page document across the table. "This is your only path forward that does not involve the criminal justice system. You have 2 options. This is option 1. She spelled it out. "You will, within 30 days, repay the $58,450 of fraudulent debt, clearing my client's name and credit. You will also repay the $210,000 you have coerced from her over the last 6 years, which includes the $50,000 stolen from her trust fund. You will, of course, forfeit any claim to the Belmont estate. Finally, you will both sign a binding, permanent no-contact order covering Ms. Arden, Mr. Belmont, and all Belmont properties and entities, 5 years, with 0 tolerance." Vivian's mouth twisted into an ugly shape. $268,000? You're insane. This is a shakedown. "That is option 1, Marla said calmly. "Option 2 is this." She tapped the large, overflowing banker's box that sat on the credenza behind her. "If you do not sign this agreement by the end of this meeting, that box, which contains the full, unredacted file on your activities, will be hand-delivered to the Denver District Attorney's Office by 4 p.m. today." She ticked the items off on her fingers. "It contains the digital recordings, the affidavits of fraud, the certified bank statements, the IP address logs, the timeline of extortion, the video of you, Mr. Arden, harassing my client's building staff, the threatening note you left at her door, the forensic accounting report on Cole and Arden Holdings, LLC, which we have identified as your money laundering vehicle. Everything. The DA's office has already been alerted to a potential high-value fraud case. They are waiting for my call." It was all there. The whole, ugly truth, packed in a cardboard box. For a second, I thought Arthur was going to be sick. But then, Vivian did something I didn't expect. She laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was a high, brittle, tearing sound. "You," she said, pointing a shaking finger at me, "you think she has the stomach for this? You think this girl, who I've known since she was a child, is going to send her own father to prison? This is legal blackmail. It's a performance." She looked at Marla. "You're a joke. She's bluffing. She's weak. She always has been." She stood up, pulling her ivory-white jacket straight. "We are leaving. This meeting is over. And Sable, when this little tantrum of yours is done, and you've spent all of your grandfather's money on this shark, do not come crawling back to us. You are no longer part of this family." She turned and walked to the door. Arthur, clumsy and panicked, gathered himself and scurried after her. Like a loyal, terrified dog. He looked back at me once, his eyes wide, pleading. He wanted me to stop her. He wanted me to fold. I just stared back at him. I said nothing. The door clicked shut. The room was silent again. The lingering scent of Vivian's perfume the only sign they had ever been there. My whole body felt light. I had been braced for a collapse, for a tidal wave of guilt to overwhelm me the second they left. But there was nothing, just stillness. Horace, who had not moved a muscle, turned his head slowly and looked at me. His pale blue eyes were not soft or comforting. They were bright, sharp. He looked satisfied. He had been watching the rhythm of the entire exchange, watching them take the bait, watching them underestimate me, watching them walk right into the trap he had not even had to spring. "Well done," he said. I looked down at my hands, which were resting on the cold, polished table. I had been clenching them so tightly my fingernails had left half-moons in my palms. I unclenched them. They were perfectly steady. They were not shaking at all. Marla did not move from her desk. As the door clicked shut, she simply looked at Horace. 4 p.m., she stated. "Hold that," Horace replied, his voice calm. He stood. "Sable, walk with me." We left Marla's office, the banker's box of evidence sitting on her credenza like an undetonated bomb. The elevator ride down was silent. We stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the sky a sharp, bright blue. I had walked into that building feeling like a victim appealing for help. I had walked out feeling like a witness. His Bentley was waiting. The driver held the door. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "My office," he said. "The Belmont building. It is time you saw where you come from." The Belmont building was nothing like Marla's sleek, modern tower. It was an old-world fortress of granite and dark-tinted brass, a monument to dynastic wealth in the heart of downtown. The lobby was silent, cavernous, and smelled of marble and old leather. We rode a private elevator, all polished mahogany and felt-lined walls, to the top floor. His office was vast. It was not a room. It was a territory, lined with books, maps, and a quiet, terrifying sense of permanence. A massive desk sat before a window that looked down on the entire city. Horace did not sit at his desk. He walked to a paneled wall that looked like part of the library. He pressed a spot. The panel clicked and opened, revealing not a bar, but a heavy bank vault-style safe. He spun the dial with a series of precise, metallic clicks. "Vivian and Arthur made 2 fatal errors in that meeting," he said, his back to me, his hand on the dial. "First, they assumed you were weak. They believe, as all abusers do, that their victim is defined by the abuse. They cannot imagine you as anything else." The safe opened with a heavy pressurized thump. "Second," he continued, retrieving a thick, leather-bound portfolio, "they assumed I was merely a source of money. They think I am just a rich old man. They do not understand that I am rich because I am not merely an old man." He placed the portfolio on the massive desk. "Marla's case is excellent. It is clean. It is built on the provable, recent felonies, the identity theft, the assault, the digital recordings. It is designed to secure a quick, favorable settlement by leveraging the threat of criminal charges. It is a scalpel." He opened the portfolio. This is the hammer." It was a document, an addendum to his will. "I had this drafted 2 years ago," he said, his voice flat. "I began to have suspicions. The way Vivian spoke of you, the way Arthur avoided my calls. I had my internal auditors look into your father's finances." He tapped the top page. "This is an addendum to the Belmont Trust. It states that if an independent audit, triggered at my discretion, should find that you, Sable Arden, have become the target of sustained financial abuse or coercion by any party, including your father, 2 things happen automatically." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. 1. All supervisory control of your inheritance reverts from me to a bonded, third-party counsel. This protects the estate from any claim that I am manipulating you. 2. The trust is authorized to allocate unlimited, unrestricted funds for your legal protection, security, and recovery. My breath caught in my throat. Unlimited. The events of the past week triggered that audit, Horace said. The loan application was the trigger. The meeting this morning, the recording, that was the confirmation. As of 10 a.m. today, your legal defense is being funded by an ironclad, multi-generational trust. Marla's retainer is a fraction of what is now at your disposal. Attached to the addendum was the internal audit he mentioned. They were clever, he said, turning a page. Vivian's little LLC, Cole and Arden Holdings. We found the transfers from your trust fund, just as my accountant suspected, but we found more. Arthur wasn't just a beneficiary, he was a signatory. He actively participated in the dissolution of your trust, transferring the money to their shell company. He wasn't coerced by his wife, he was her business partner. He then walked back to the safe and retrieved a small, fireproof lockbox. He opened it with a key. Inside was not paper, it was a single, encrypted hard drive. As I said, I had suspicions, he said, his voice dropping. So I engaged a firm. It was distasteful, but your mother, she would have insisted. He held up the drive. Vivian was not smart enough to commit this level of fraud on her own. She had help, a so-called consultant based in Wilmington. This drive contains archived copies of her emails to him. She was sloppy. She used the home network. My stomach turned. What's on it? A full education, Horace said, his voice laced with contempt. Instructions on how to apply for credit in another person's name using a custodial address, how to mimic digital signatures, how to layer applications to avoid fraud alerts, how to create a narrative of instability around the victim in case they ever found out, so their claims would be dismissed as hysteria. It is a step-by-step record of a conspiracy to commit identity theft, dating back 24 months. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something under the ice. It was a deep, cold, ancestral rage. Marla has the evidence to prove they did it. This drive is the evidence to prove they planned to do it. This is not a family dispute. It is a criminal enterprise. The question that had been burning in my mind finally broke free. A painful, whispered accusation. You knew. You suspected this 2 years ago. Why did you wait? Why did you let it happen? Why did you let her hit me? Horace looked away from me, toward the window. His voice was quiet. Because, Sable, if I had intervened, I would have been the villain. You were conditioned to protect them. You would have defended your father. You would have seen my help as an attack on your family. You would have hated me for it, and you would have been right. He turned back, his gaze unyielding. I could not be your savior. It would have been just another man controlling your life, telling you what your reality was. You had to be your own witness. You had to see the truth in that house, in your mother's basement. I could not pull you out. All I could do was build this. He gestured to the files, the safe, the office. I built an arsenal. I built a fortress. I built a legal wall of fire to wait for you. But, Sable, you had to be the one to choose to walk out of that basement. You had to be the one to light the match. The logic was cold, brutal, and absolutely correct. I felt a chill run through me. He hadn't saved me from the abuse, but he had guaranteed my survival of it. He then reached back into the safe, into a velvet-lined drawer, and pulled out a small, old-fashioned, tarnished silver key. This, he said, pressing it into my palm, is from your mother. I looked at the key. It was ornate, delicate. Your mother was brilliant. She was not a fool. She knew Arthur's weaknesses long before I did. She saw the way Vivian looked at him, at this house, at her life. Your mother did not trust him. So, she made her own preparations. He led me back down to the lobby, and then to a separate, guarded door that led to the Belmont private vaults. We went through 2 security checkpoints. He stopped at a burnished steel box. This box was not part of her estate. It was not in her will. Arthur has no knowledge of it. It was registered to me, with a single instruction, to be given to you, Sable Arden, in the event of my death, or at my sole discretion. My discretion is now. He inserted his own key, and I inserted the silver one. The box slid open with a quiet, hydraulic hiss. It was almost empty. There was no jewelry, no stacks of cash. There was a single, thick envelope. Inside was a letter, in my mother's hand, and a life insurance policy. I pulled out the policy. The name on the front was hers. The beneficiary was Sable Arden. I thought this lapsed, I whispered. Vivian and Arthur said it. It had no value, that she'd stopped paying. She had not, Horace said. It was a whole life policy with a significant cash value. When they told you it had lapsed, what they meant was they had tried to cash it out and, upon finding they could not, had abandoned it. I have been paying the premiums myself, from my trust, for the last 6 years. It has been waiting for you. He pointed to a line item, the cash surrender value, as of today, $92,000. I looked at the number, 92,000. It is not a fortune, Horace said, but it is a foundation. It is enough to immediately pay off the $58,000 of fraudulent debt they saddled you with, clearing your name without touching a dollar of your own savings, and it leaves you with more than $30,000, a safety fund, your mother's final gift. I sank onto the small bench inside the vault room. I held the policy in one hand and my mother's key in the other. And for the second time that week, I cried. It was not the panicked, desperate sobbing of the basement. It was not the cold, clear shock in Marla's office. This was a deep, shuddering wave of grief and gratitude. I was not abandoned. I was not alone. My mother, from across the veil of death, had seen this. She had known, and she had left me a life raft. My grandfather, for all his coldness, had been my secret sentinel. I was not a victim. I was the protected, armed daughter of a Belmont. I wiped my eyes. I stood up. "What now?" I said, my voice clear. "Now, we proceed," Horace said. "Marla will file the criminal complaint with the district attorney. That is the state's battle. They will investigate the conspiracy, the hard drive, the LLC. They will decide whether to indict Arthur and Vivian." He put his hand on my shoulder. "But the civil suit, that is our battle. We will file for total repayment, for damages, for fraud, for emotional distress. We will dismantle Cole and Arden Holdings and seize every asset they have." He paused. "But we will give them one last chance to surrender, not for their sake, for ours, to prove we acted with honor. I will have Marla send one final letter, an invitation to a final reconciliation meeting. Here, in this building, they are to bring their full financial disclosures, if they refuse, or if they lie. We file the civil suit Monday morning, and we release the hard drive to the press." He looked at me. "They think they are safe. They think you are weak. They think they can wait you out. They are about to find out what happens when they are no longer fighting a terrified girl in a basement. They are about to be fighting me." The meeting at Marla's office had been a declaration of war. Vivian and Arthur had walked out, arrogant and defiant, believing it was still my word against theirs, that I was still the weak girl who would eventually break. They had no idea that their network of lies was already unraveling, not just from the outside in, but from the inside out. The first crack came from the person I least expected, Lena. 2 days after the disastrous meeting, she texted me, not the hysterical, accusatory voicemail from before, but a single, short message. "Can I see you? Please, not at the house, alone." I agreed to meet her at a busy, anonymous coffee shop downtown. She was already there when I arrived, huddled in a corner booth, looking small and pale. The defiance was gone, replaced by a raw, sleepless terror. She wasn't drinking coffee. She was just shredding a napkin into a pile of white lint. "He's really gone," she whispered as I sat down. "Bryce, he's not postponing. He's gone. His parents. They called my mom a grifter. They said they're lucky they found out before he was legally tied to us." She looked at me, her eyes red. They think I knew. They think I was in on it. The $12,000. He thinks I was trying to steal from you, too. Were you? I asked, my voice flat. No, she cried, attracting a few stares. She lowered her voice, a desperate, ragged hiss. I needed that deposit. Mom said you were just being difficult. She said you always came through. I didn't know about any of it. The loans, the other cards, I swear. I just looked at her. You have to believe me, she pleaded. She controlled everything. I did what she told me. She's not who you think she is. She's not even sick. I know, I said. No, you don't, she insisted, her hands shaking as she dug in her purse. You don't know. You've heard her heart spells, right? The shortness of breath? The episodes? She pulled out her phone and swiped to a photo. She pushed it across the table. The photo was of a prescription pill bottle. The name on it was Vivian's. The drug was a standard, low-dose beta blocker. But it was the date filled that caught my eye. It was over 3 years old. The instructions said, take one daily as needed for high blood pressure. She has high blood pressure, Lena whispered. But that's it, this bottle. She finished it years ago. She keeps it in her nightstand. It's empty. She swiped to another photo, a close-up of the bottle, rattling in her hand, showing it was, in fact, empty. Before she calls you, Lena said, her voice trembling. The big calls. The ones where she can't breathe? I've seen her. She goes into her room. She dry swallows. Nothing. She just makes the sound. She grips her chest. She practices her weak voice. And then she dials your number. She was admitting it. She was handing me the proof of the emotional blackmail, the very core of the coercion. Why are you telling me this, Lena? Because she ruined my life, Lena spat, her brief flicker of alliance turning back to pure, selfish panic. Bryce won't even talk to me, but he called me last night. He said he'd consider speaking with me if I came clean with you. She leaned in. He knows something. He was at the house last month when a package came, a bank package, addressed to you. He saw Mom take it. He saw her. He saw her sign your name on the delivery slip. He told me he saw it. He said he'll tell you he saw it, if it helps him, if it helps me. So, Bryce wasn't an ally. He was a rat, offering up a piece of evidence to distance himself from the sinking ship. He was corroborating the mail fraud. Tell Bryce to tell Marla Quinn what he saw, I said, standing up. And you should get a lawyer and stop talking to your mother. I left her in the coffee shop, staring at the pile of shredded napkins. The family was eating itself alive. That afternoon, I acted on an impulse, a memory of a different, older fight. I drove to my Aunt Evelyn's house, my mother's sister, the woman who had tried to warn me. She opened the door, and her face, so much like my mother's, crumpled with a complex mix of anger and relief. Sable, my God, it took you long enough. I didn't make excuses. You were right, I said. I'm sorry. I was blind, and I was a coward, and now I'm fighting them, and I need help. She led me inside, to a house that smelled like my childhood, like my mother's house used to smell. I knew this day would come, she said, pulling a box from a high shelf. Your mother. She wasn't just my sister. She was my best friend, and she was terrified. She handed me a slim, leather-bound book, a journal. She kept this the last 2 years of her life, Evelyn said, her voice thick, after her diagnosis, after that woman started showing up. I opened it, my mother's elegant, familiar script. At first, it was just notes on her treatment, but then Vivian's name appeared. October 14th, Vivian came by again, with a casserole. She tidied the kitchen. I found her in Arthur's office, looking at the mail. She said she was just sorting it to be helpful. Arthur thinks she's a saint. I feel cold when she's here. November 2nd, she's reorganized the household bills. To take the pressure off Arthur. Arthur is so relieved. He's letting her, He's letting her in. He doesn't see the way she looks at my things, at my life. January 10th, a fight. I told Arthur I was uncomfortable with her handling our accounts. He told me I was paranoid and sick, that Vivian was a godsend. He chose her. He's choosing her. And I'm still here. February 1st, I've set up the box. At Horace's, the policy. Sable will need it. He won't protect her. He can't even protect himself. I closed the book, my hands shaking. This wasn't just proof. It was my mother's voice, her final testimony. It proved the pattern of control started long before her death. It proved Arthur's complicity was not new. "This is," I whispered. "It's her ghost," Evelyn said. "Now go, use it, and make them pay for what they did to her, and to you." The pieces were falling into place with a terrifying velocity. The next day, I got a call from Marla. "The bank investigation is complete," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "We have the IP address for the credit card applications." "The house," I said. "No," Marla replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Even better. The public Wi-Fi at the Daily Grind coffee shop on Pearl Street. We pulled the dates. The applications were submitted at 10 a.m. on October 16th. 2 of them, back to back. Vivian's favorite coffee shop," I breathed. "She has her charity meetings there every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. "Exactly," Marla said. "And I've already confirmed with the manager. They have a high-definition, 4-camera security system, and they keep their recordings for 30 days. Kira, my best friend, was the one who went. She was faster, more tech-savvy, and she arrived with a high-capacity hard drive before Marla's subpoena had even been processed, convincing the manager to check for a lost item on that date and time. She brought the footage to my hotel room. We watched it on her laptop. 10:02 a.m. Camera 3, overlooking the main seating area. There she was, Vivian, sitting alone at her usual corner table. She ordered her usual cappuccino. She looked around. She pulled out her laptop. 10:04 a.m. She pulls out a piece of paper. My heart stopped. It was a copy of my driver's license. I could see the distinctive blue and green of the Colorado ID. 10:05 a.m. to 10:11 a.m. We watched, mesmerized, as she typed, her eyes flicking between my license and the screen. She was clicking, filling fields. The bank logs Marla had were a perfect match. The application for the visa was submitted at 10:10 a.m. 10:12 a.m. She sat back, sipped her coffee. She picked up her phone. She typed again. The Amex application was submitted from her phone at 10:14 a.m., piggybacking on the same Wi-Fi. We had it. We had her, on camera, committing the fraud. While Kira was securing the video, Carlos, my building manager, was signing his affidavit. It detailed Arthur's aggressive behavior, his demands for a key, his attempts to smear me as unstable, and his specific, shouted threat. "You tell her she owes us!" It was a complete picture. The long-term emotional manipulation from my mother's diary, the faked illness from Lena, the eyewitness to mail fraud from Bryce, the harassment from Arthur, and the high-definition, undeniable proof of Vivian committing identity theft. The social and legal pressure was mounting, just as Horace had planned. Marla sent the footage, the affidavit, and a copy of my mother's journal pages to the district attorney's office. This was no longer a civil dispute. This was a criminal case. The DA's office moved fast. A formal summons was delivered to the house in Lakewood. Vivian Cole and Arthur Arden were called in for preliminary questioning in a felony fraud investigation. The social fallout was simultaneous. The rumors Horace had planted had now become verifiable facts, circulating through the charity committees. Eleanor Vance, the chairwoman, acted. Vivian's name was quietly removed from the benefit committee list on the Children's Literacy Fund website. Then it was removed from the list of donors. She was, in the polite, bloodless language of that world, unpersoned. They were trapped. Their reputation, the only thing Vivian truly valued, was in ashes. And now, they were facing prison. The final crack appeared on Friday. A new wave of mail had arrived at my apartment. I had put in a forwarding request, but some things had slipped through. I found a pile on my doormat, including one addressed to Arthur. It wasn't from a bank. It was from a private lender I'd never heard of. Final notice, past due. I opened it. It was a collection notice for a high-interest, short-term loan, a bridge loan, for $50,000, taken out 6 months prior, secured not by the house, but as a secondary lien against it. This was it. This was the secret loan Horace had mentioned. This was why they were 6 months delinquent. This was why they needed the $200,000 loan so desperately, not just for the wedding, not just to pay off the fraudulent cards, but to cover this secret, toxic debt that was about to pull them under. The harassment, the slap, the desperation, it all made sense. They weren't just trying to get rich, they were trying to survive. They had nowhere left to run. Their social standing was gone. Their allies had defected. Their crimes were on video, and their finances were collapsing. The ground was crumbling right under their feet. Marla called me on Friday afternoon. The air in my hotel room crackled with a dry, electric tension. We had been compiling the final figures. "We're done," she said. Her voice was devoid of emotion, a pure instrument of fact. The initial $210,000 was a conservative estimate. After my forensic team traced the transfers from the Cole and Arden Holdings shell company directly to their personal expenditures, 2 vacations to Aruba, a down payment on Lena's car, 3 years of designer clothing, their wine club membership, the total, provable, coerced transfer of funds is $232,000. She paused. Add the $58,000 in fraudulent debt, and we have our number. The final civil demand is for $290,000, plus compounded interest and all associated legal fees. The sum was breathtaking. It was a number so large it felt unreal. But it was a precise, itemized list of my own slow-motion dismemberment. It wasn't a penalty. It was a refund. The full weight of the evidence we had gathered, the video, the journal, the bank logs, the recordings, had been sent to the district attorney. The pressure was now coming from 2 directions: the civil suit that would bankrupt them, and the criminal one that would imprison them. That evening, the first crack in their resolve appeared. My phone rang. Arthur. I enabled the recording app Marla had installed on my phone and answered. I said nothing. Sable? His voice was not the booming, aggressive tone from Marla's office. It was thin, reedy, and slick with a manufactured, desperate pity. Sable, honey, please, this has gone too far. I waited. The silence was my new weapon. Look, he stammered. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. This is just a misunderstanding. Your grandfather, these lawyers, they're twisting everything. We're family, Vivian. My God. Sable. She's destroyed. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. She just cries. Is this what you want? I heard the familiar script, the guilt, the appeal to my goodness, the phantom illness. Just call them off. Sabe, he pleaded. We can talk. Just us. We can work this out, like we always do. Please, don't do this to me. To us. I just held the phone to my ear. Breathing slowly, I let the silence stretch, filling it with his own panic. Sable, are you even there? Say something. I heard a muffled scrape, as if he had covered the receiver with his hand. But he was clumsy. It wasn't enough. I heard him speak. His voice no longer pleading, but a sharp, furious whisper to someone else in the room. She's not saying anything. She's just listening. Vivian's voice, a sibilant hiss I could hear clearly. Is she crying? Is she breaking? No, nothing, he hissed back. She's just sitting there. The cold little... Damn it. Just keep stalling. Drag it out past the weekend. We just need to get past Monday. She'll get tired. She'll run out of money. Or nerve. She always gets tired. Just stall. I hung up. I saved the audio file, labeled it stall, and emailed it to Marla. Her reply was 2 words: game over. The next morning, Horace summoned me, not to the hotel, but to the granite fortress of the Belmont building. He was in his vast office, looking not at me, but out the window at the city. "They are predictable," he said, his voice quiet. "Their arrogance was their primary flaw. Now, it is their desperation. Your father's call was the act of a drowning man." He turned to me. "I have ensured they have no driftwood to grab. That private, high-interest loan you discovered? The one they took out to cover their other debts? The one that was forcing the foreclosure?" "Yes," I said. "My holding company purchased it, this morning, from the lender." I stared at him. The bank that holds their primary mortgage was more than happy to sell the entire distressed asset portfolio to an interested party. As of 9 a.m. today, I am your father's sole creditor. I own the note on his house. The foreclosure they were trying to stop with your money is no longer a faceless corporate problem. It is my problem, and I am far less patient than a bank. He had them. He didn't just have a legal case against them. He owned the roof over their heads. While Horace was securing his financial chokehold, Vivian was making her own final, desperate move. She tried to reactivate her social network, the one she had spent a decade building. She called Eleanor Vance, the chairwoman of the charity fund, the woman Horace had spoken to at the club. Vivian must have thought she could spin a tale of a senile old man and a vindictive, unstable granddaughter. She must have thought her years of charm and feigned friendship still held some currency. She was wrong. Horace played the recording for me later. Eleanor, loyal to the core, had recorded the entire call. Vivian's voice, stripped of all its polished charm, was a raw, screeching thing. "You have to talk to him. Eleanor, he's poisoning her. That old bastard is using that ungrateful, pathetic girl to ruin me. I took her in. I gave her a home. She's lying. She's unstable. I'm telling you, she's always been weak. She's nothing." It was a full minute of pure, venomous slander. Horace switched it off. "Proof of malice," he said simply. "It will be invaluable in the damages phase." The final piece of the puzzle arrived that afternoon, delivered not by a lawyer, but by a terrified, self-interested party, Lena. She was too afraid to see me. She met Kira in a gas station parking lot and handed over a USB drive. "This is the wedding file," Lena had stammered, her eyes darting around. "This proves it was all her. Bryce had nothing to do with it. You have to tell them. Bryce didn't know." Kira and I opened the file. It was a folder labeled Wedding 2.0. Inside was a single spreadsheet. It was not a wedding budget, it was a business plan. Column A, Action. Column B, Source. Column C, Amount. Line 1, Secure deposit from S. Leverage, Wedding Mom's Health. Amount, $12,000. Line 2, Pay broker retainer for B loan, Belmont. Amount, $8,000. Line 3, Pay off fraudulent Amex, Minnow, BAL. Amount, $4,000. Line 4, Secure $200K loan via broker using S. Collateral. Line 5, Pay off private lender, foreclosure. Amount, $55,000. Line 6, Pay off mortgage arrears. Amount, $18,000. Line 7, Remainder, wedding household new car. It was all there, a meticulous, step-by-step plan for their fraud. It proved the $12,000 request wasn't just for a wedding. It was the seed money for the entire conspiracy. The file's last modified by metadata was clear. Vivian Cole. We sent the hot mic recording, the slander recording, and this spreadsheet to the district attorney. This time, the DA's office didn't just respond, it acted. Marla called me, her voice tight with finality. "The DA is done. They have formally communicated their position. If your father and Ms. Cole do not have a fully executed civil settlement with you by close of business on Sunday, the state will be filing a multi-count criminal indictment Monday morning, racketeering, aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit. They are looking at a mandatory minimum. The timeline was set. Monday morning, the hammer would fall. Marla sent the ultimatum, a final, formal letter to their new, terrified lawyer. Final mediation, my office, this Sunday, 10 a.m. Your clients will appear, and they will bring their complete, unredacted financial records for the last 5 years, including all statements for Cole and Arden Holdings. If they fail to appear, or if the records are incomplete, we will see them in criminal court Monday morning. No further extensions will be granted. They were trapped. Their finances were gone. Their social lives were radioactive. Their daughter had defected, and they were staring down a Monday indictment that would send them to prison. They did the only thing left for them to do. They imploded. The call came to Marla at 3 a.m. on Sunday, just 7 hours before the meeting. It was from the Lakewood Police Department. Ms. Quinn, the night shift sergeant said, we're responding to a disturbance at 1482 Willow Lane. Neighbors reported violent screaming and the sound of glass breaking. We sent a car. The occupants, an Arthur Arden and a Vivian Cole, were in a severe domestic dispute. No physical blows. But the officer's report describes Mrs. Cole as hysterical and incoherent, and Mr. Arden as belligerent and heavily intoxicated. We have Mr. Arden on a body cam recording shouting, "She did it! It was all her idea. I just did what she said. We had to separate them. He's at his sister's. She's at the house. Just thought you should know. Given your name was on the legal notice we saw." Marla hung up. She added the police incident report to the file. It was the last page. The complete, documented collapse. I sat in the window of my hotel room, looking out at the city. A cold, hard rain was falling. The same kind of rain that had fallen on Thanksgiving. The night it all began. They were apart, terrified, drunk, and turning on each other. They were broken. I was calm. The fear was gone. The guilt, that heavy toxic cloak I had worn for a decade, was gone. The only thing I felt was a cold, quiet stillness. I touched the small silver key that I now wore on a chain around my neck. My mother's key. I thought about the sound that had saved me. That quiet, insistent tap, tap, tap on the basement door. The sound of my grandfather arriving. It wasn't just a knock. It was a signal. It was the sound of the lock on my cage finally turning, opening the door, and inviting me to step out of the darkness and into the light. The mediation room at Marla Quinn's office, this Sunday morning, was different from the last. The lights were brighter, whiter, humming with a sterile, clinical intensity. It was an operating theater. I sat with Horace and Marla. We were not alone. A fourth person sat with us. A sharp-looking man in a quiet suit who had introduced himself as Assistant District Attorney Mark Evans. He was here, as Marla explained, purely as an interested observer. He had placed a thick, blue-backed file on the table in front of him. It remained closed. Vivian and Arthur arrived 10 minutes late. It was not a power play. It was the shuffling, hollow-eyed arrival of the truly defeated. Vivian's ivory-white suit was wrinkled, her makeup applied hastily over skin puffy and red from crying. She looked brittle, exhausted, and small. Arthur was haggard, his face gray. He smelled of stale whiskey and utter despair. They faltered when they saw the assistant DA, their lawyer, a cheap, nervous-looking man they must have retained in a panic, visibly paled. They sat. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the lights. "We are here," Marla began, her voice a flat, procedural monotone, "to finalize the civil settlement regarding the multiple felonies perpetrated against my client. The district attorney's office has graciously agreed to observe this mediation before they proceed with their own case on Monday morning." The DA said nothing. He simply rested his hand on the blue folder. "Vivian," Marla said, "you claimed in our last meeting that my client was weak, that she was bluffing, and that this was legal blackmail. You were mistaken. This is not a negotiation. This is a presentation of the evidence that will be used against you in both civil and criminal court." She did not slide them files. She turned to the large monitor on the wall. "First," she said, "the bank applications. We have your IP logs. But more clearly, we have this." She hit a key. The screen lit up. Camera 3, the daily grind. Vivian's face. Vivian made a small, strangled sound in the back of her throat. We watched her, in high definition. Pull out my driver's license. We watched her type. We watched her, on her phone. Submit the second application. That is you, Ms. Cole, committing 2 counts of aggravated identity theft. Marla clicked again. A new file opened. The audio wave of the basement recording. We have, of course, your conspiracy, captured in your own voices. She played only one line, the one that made the DA's eyebrows rise. Vivian's voice, cold and clear. She was crying too loud. I had to slap her quiet. That, Marla said, is your admission to assault, which corroborates the physical injuries my client sustained. She clicked again, a scanned document. This is your threatening note. Mr. Arden, left at my client's door. Proof of intimidation. Click. This is the signed affidavit from the building manager. Proof of harassment. Click. These are the emails between you, Vivian, and your fraud consultant. Proof of conspiracy and premeditation. Click. This is a copy of my client's mother's journal, establishing the long-term pattern of your undue influence and control. Click. This is the recording of your phone call, Mr. Arden, where you were clearly heard conspiring to stall and drag out these proceedings. Click. This is the recording of your call to Eleanor Vance, Ms. Cole, proving malice and slander. She saved the worst for last. And finally, this is the police incident report from 3 a.m. this morning. Lakewood PD, responding to a violent domestic disturbance. It quotes you, Mr. Arden, as shouting, and this is from the officer's body cam. It was all her idea. I just did what she said. It seems, Mr. Arden, you have already confessed. Arthur slumped in his chair as if his spine had been removed. Vivian was staring at the blank screen, her entire body shaking in tiny, uncontrollable tremors. The assistant DA slowly, deliberately, picked up the blue folder. He tapped it on the table, straightening the edges. My office, he said, his voice mild, has prepared a 22-count indictment. It will be filed tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Unless a full and complete restitution agreement is reached here, today, and even then, we may proceed. We are not bound by this civil agreement. The threat was absolute. Prison. Vivian's lawyer, sweating, started to speak. My clients, we are prepared to offer. Horace held up a hand. He had not spoken a word. My turn, he said. He reached into his own leather portfolio and pulled out a single, thick document. He slid it across the table. It was not a settlement. It was a mortgage contract. This is your home loan, Horace said, his voice flat. The primary mortgage and the secondary, delinquent note from your private lender. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, I purchased them both. I am your new creditor. I own your house. This was the hammer. This was the blow they never saw coming. Vivian let out a sound, a sharp gasp of air, as if she had just been punched in the stomach. So here is my offer, Horace said. Marla's settlement is option 1. Prison is option 2. My option is this. If you do not sign Ms. Quinn's agreement in full within the next 10 minutes, I will be executing the acceleration clause on your delinquent loan. I will foreclose. You will be evicted in 30 days. You will be left with nothing, and the DA will still come for you. Checkmate. They had no home. They had no money. They had no reputation. They had no options. Marla slid the final settlement agreement across the table. This is the end, she said. She outlined the terms one last time. One, you will agree to the immediate, court-supervised sale of the Lakewood house. From the proceeds, you will repay the $290,000 in full, plus interest. 2. You will use your remaining liquid assets to immediately repay the $58,450 of fraudulent debt. which my client has already paid from her own funds. 3. You will both sign a permanent, 5-year, no-contact order, enforceable by immediate arrest. 4. You will both sign this letter. She placed a new piece of paper in front of them. A full sworn apology, a confession, detailing your actions, admitting to the fraud, the theft, and the abuse. It will be notarized. Today. Arthur was shaking his head, mumbling, "No, no, Bao." Vivian just stared at the paper. The woman who had built an empire on image and control was looking at the instrument of her absolute, unconditional surrender. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She signed. Arthur, his face ashen, followed. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was the only sound in the room. It was the sound of the hammer falling. It was done. It was heavier than any prison sentence. The moment the ink was dry, Marla took the pages. She handed a copy to the DA. She then pulled a new set of documents from her briefcase and handed them to the private security officer standing by the door. "Mr. Arden, Ms. Cole," Marla said, her voice crisp, "you are now served." "What?" their lawyer squeaked. "A temporary restraining order," Marla explained. "Signed by Judge Harrison this morning. Based on the assault and the police report, it is effective immediately. You are required to vacate the premises. You will be escorted from this building. You are not to come within 500 feet of my client. Ever again." Vivian finally broke. A low, animal wail came from her throat. She slumped forward, her perfect hair covering her face. Arthur just stared, catatonic. The security guard stepped forward. "This way." They were escorted out, not as partners, but as two separate, broken individuals, a future of court-supervised sales, criminal probation, and social ruin ahead of them. The door clicked shut. I sat in the silence. It was over. Horace looked at me, his pale eyes finally showing a flicker of warmth. "You are not in the basement anymore. Sable." I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it had reached my lungs in a decade. I looked out the window, at the sharp, clear blue of the sky. "I was never there again," I said. "Not after you knocked." 1 month later, the red brick house in Lakewood was sold. The proceeds were wired, under judicial supervision, to Marla's trust account, and then to mine. I took the $92,000 from my mother's life insurance and paid off the $58,000 of fraudulent debt they had racked up in my name, my credit score, which had been frozen and then annihilated, rebounded, clean and strong. With the settlement money and the $30,000 left from my mother's final gift, I bought a condominium, a bright, glass-walled space on a high floor, with a wide balcony that looked west, over the city, to the entire, unbroken spine of the Front Range Mountains. My company, Northwind Analytics, having heard whispers of my legal battle, had been impressed by my resilience. They promoted me. I was now head of data integrity. I had a housewarming party, small, just Kira and a few friends. Lena showed up, uninvited. She stood at my door, holding a $10 bottle of red wine, her eyes shadowed. "I know," she said. "I don't deserve to be here. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For all of it. For being a coward. For not seeing it. For everything." I looked at her. This ghost from my old life, she was collateral damage, but she was also a participant. "Thank you for the wine, Lena," I said, taking it. I opened the door a little wider, but I did not invite her in. She understood. It was a small opening, an acknowledgement of her apology, but the fence was still there. The boundaries were permanent. She nodded, turned, and left. That night, I stood on my new balcony. The mountain air was cool and sharp. I touched the small silver key around my neck. I thought of the rain on Thanksgiving, the suffocating anger, the fear. I remembered the sound that had changed my life. That quiet tap, tap, tap on the cellar door. My story didn't end with a fiery explosion of revenge. It ended with the cold, satisfying click of a lock falling into place. It ended with justice. I was not the family ATM. I was not the soft girl who always broke. I was Sable Arden. I was free. And I was finally, completely, standing in the light. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know your thoughts, and especially where in the world you're listening from. So drop a comment below and let's chat. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you want to help this story reach more people, please hit that hype button. Your support means everything.